I started doing the project, photographing the homeless, recording their stories, and then getting the photos and stories out there and hearing feedback from the general public that's changing their perspective of homelessness, that they can no longer walk by someone on the street and think that they chose to be there or judge them. Now reading my stories and seeing that they don't choose to be in that situation, and in reality they've gone through really hard things that any one of us could go through in our lives. My name's Leah, and I've been working on this project photographing people experiencing homelessness and recording their stories for the past several years. I started in 2015, and now I have 4 books out called Nowhere to Call Home, Photographs and Stories of the Homeless, and this whole project is really centered around the 2 goals of humanizing people experiencing homelessness and shining the spotlight on the problem of homelessness. They're wonderful people that have just fallen into these horrible situations that any one of us could get into. So even that first experience just opened our eyes, and my father and I decided that this would really be important to take on as a project, which we have done, obviously, because we've been doing it now since 2015, so for several years now. But another big influence upon me beginning to do this project, more on a subconscious level though, was my mother Sarah's story, because my mother was homeless as a child. She was found wandering the streets of Calcutta, India at the age of 3. She had several deep cuts in her head and was probably bleeding at the time. So a police officer took pity on her, which usually wouldn't have happened if she wasn't so severely wounded, and took her to Mother Teresa's orphanage, Nirmala Shushubaban, where she was raised until the age of 5, when she was adopted to an even smaller town than I grew up in, Stayner, Ontario. So knowing that my mother was saved by Mother Teresa, and that if Mother Teresa didn't care for people experiencing homelessness, that my mother wouldn't be alive, I wouldn't be alive. So I think that's definitely had a huge impact upon me doing the work that I do, but it's more on a subconscious level because it wasn't the direct cause of me beginning to do the project, but it definitely is a huge drive for me. And Mother Teresa is also one of my biggest inspirations. I take one of her mottos actually as a motto with the work that I do with people experiencing homelessness, and that's that if you judge people, you don't have time to love them. And she used to always say that in her work, and I found that is so important with the work that I do, or with just going about our daily lives, in fact, that when you see someone on the streets, the last thing we should do is judge them because we have no idea why they're there. When the pandemic first started, my father and I, my father, Tim Denbok, who helps me with my project, we sort of took a break for a couple months because we were all instructed to stay home and social distance, so we were just trying to stay safe. But then we ran into this article that really highlighted how the pandemic was affecting people experiencing homelessness, and it just opened our eyes up to how horrible it really was. And even though my father and I work with people experiencing homelessness on a daily basis, things that were completely unimaginable for us were affecting the homeless, and it made us realize no matter how dangerous it was really important for us to get out on the streets and of course be careful, but to record the stories of how the pandemic was affecting people experiencing homelessness. So we got out there, and we were starting to see that these things were true, and that people experiencing homelessness lives were already difficult before the pandemic, but through the pandemic became almost unbearable. They were holding like broken masks up to their face. Some people didn't even know what the pandemic was. Things that were so horrible to see. So we got a lot of stories when the pandemic was the worst, and we compiled them into one of my newest books, the 4th volume of my book series, which is Nowhere to Call Home, Photographs and Stories of the Homeless, Volume 4. And that will really highlight a lot of those stories. We sort of call it the pandemic edition because it's really centered around that. And although things are slightly starting to get better now, it's really important for us to remember that they might not get better for people experiencing homelessness, and it's a really important time for us all to think about what's happening and to push that there's more affordable housing out there, that homelessness will end.